This video is brought to you by Hit Point Press and their Big Bad Booklet series. This month, come meet the twisted, tangled plant monstrosity, Emmeline Killjoy. Learn more at bigbads.com. And by Steamforged Games and their Epic Encounters series. With just one box, you can run an awesome cinematic adventure that your players will never forget. Use our link below the video to see all the Epic Encounter adventures. Hello and welcome back to The Gallant Goblin. Today I wanted to go back a bit and talk about an excellent book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Secrets of Magic. I think this book is, in some ways, highlights everything that I think Pathfinder brings to the table for TTRPGs. It has two really interesting new classes in the Summoner and the Magus. It gives us a deep dive on the lore of magic in Pathfinder, including treatises on arcane, divine, occult, and primal magic, as well as all the various schools of magic. There are naturally loads of new spells and new types of magical items. And finally, it introduces us to some really interesting new styles of magic that we can add into our games. To talk us through all of it, we'll be chatting with design lead and Secrets of Magic author, Mr. Logan Bonner. But let me give you just a little brief of a lowdown about what's going on in this book before we bring in Logan. First of all, you get more than 24 pages of pure lore about how magic works in the Pathfinder universe, which can really help ground your games and make the world feel more cohesive and alive. If you're playing a magic user of any sort, all this lore is going to help you develop your character and tell a story with them that will feel connected to the world that you're playing in. To that end, we also get 11 backgrounds, including an astrologer, a false medium, a magical misfit, a musical prodigy, an occult librarian, a plant whisperer, and a student of magic. Plus, there are 7 rare backgrounds that can be used to create really unique characters. These are anti-magical, chosen one, genie blessed, magical experiment, seer of the dead, song of the deep, and time traveler. The book brings 2 new classes. The summoner acts as a living anchor to a powerful, otherworldly being known as an eidolon. And you can control the development or evolution of your eidolon as you level up and you level it up. Your eidolon could be an angel, it could be an anger phantom, a beast, a construct, a demon, a devotion phantom, which is essentially like a lost soul, a dragon, a fae, an intelligent plant creature, or a psychopomp. And the other class is the magus, basically a spell sword. They train in both spells and strikes, combining them so that they can deliver their powerful spells via their weapon to deal devastating blows. They're a great versatile addition to the party that can fill multiple roles. We'll talk more about all this stuff in a little bit with Logan, but the new spells introduced in the book are exciting in themselves. But the book really just brings you also these new styles of spells, which I think are really creative. We're going to go through a couple of them here. Contingency spells allow you to queue up a spell in advance to go off when you need it. For example, you can cast Life Connection, which is a 3rd level necromancy spell, on one of your allies, which gives you a defend life reaction. When that person takes damage, you can take the damage instead of them. There are also incarnate spells, which summon a wide range of interesting creatures to the battlefield. But instead of being new participants in the battle that someone has to control with new stat blocks, they just swoop in with an arrival effect, and then on the next turn, they can kind of move where you want them to, and then they have a depart action. And that will also cause a lot of damage usually. And with incarnate spells, you can summon entire draconic legions or various kaijus or so much more. There's so many of them. There's polymorph spells, which allow you to assume different battle forms. You can choose things like a fae form to become a dryad, a naiad, a redcap, or a unicorn, or an element form to become a type of elemental with all different kinds of abilities. Of course, you also get new magus and summoner focus spells and some potent new rituals like Awaken Object, Asmodean Wager, and Mind Swap. There are hundreds of new spells here. If you're playing a caster or have a caster in your game, you're gonna want this book, if only for the new spells. But the magic items are amazing too. We also have new types of magic items like fulus, which are like consumable talismans that can be affixed to a wider variety of items. Grimoires, which are spell books that give their casters special abilities. Magical tattoos. Spell catalysts, which are upgraded spell components to superpower your spells. spell hearts, which are like permanent talismans, plus, of course, new consumables and permanent items. Maybe one of the coolest things in this book that is introduced here is a way to craft your own personalized magical staves. And finally, Chapter 5 gives you some unusual magical practices and character options which allow you to enrich your narrative in surprising ways. You can introduce cathartic magic that's powered by emotion, elementalism, flexible preparation to find a fun common ground between prepared and spontaneous spellcasting, geomancy, ley lines, shadow magic, soul seeds, soul-forged armaments, Thessalonian rune magic, the power of true names, wellspring magic, and pervasive magic for those settings where magic just permeates everything. And now that you have the lay of the land, or the ley lines of the land, as it were, let me bring in author and design lead Logan Bonner to tell us more about the book. Logan, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
How's everything going out there?
It's all right. The weather here is a little touchy right now, so we're going to see if we get some thunder and lightning and drama happening in the background.
Every time I speak to somebody from Paizo, there's always interesting weather events going out there in the Pacific Northwest. There's giant heat waves or something happening, so hopefully you'll have a little break pretty soon here and just have a nice calm winter.
It'll just be nonstop rain, but normally without the windstorm, we can handle that. Yeah.
At least it's what you're accustomed to anyway.
Yeah, sure.
But I wanted to start off today just by asking you secrets of magic. I think there's something to be said for this is sort of the new cover for your books as well. Like they're kind of breaking with tradition. Like this is the beginning of something new for Pathfinder 2nd edition. Kind of talk to us a little bit about that and what your overall goals for the project were.
So one of the big things we wanted to do, and the cover kind of goes along with this kind of general vision of our books, is to treat each one as kind of more of an individual project and kind of give it what it needs to kind of stand out, rather than having everything be like super dialed in and kind of always having the same sections each time, always having the same types of content, the same balance. To kind of just say like, well, what does this need? How can we make this interesting and fun? And the visual presentation is part of that. The big goal with this one was to kind of make it a book that's really more fun to read. A lot of our books could have the tendency to be like, well, I'm going to make a character. I'm just going to go look at a website and find the stuff I need. So we wanted to make it so like it's more rewarding to actually go through the book, find little fun things and, look at the cool art and kind of feel a little more immersed in the world by reading the book.
I love that about Pathfinder books, is it feels like, I don't know, when you go read some other books, it feels like everything has to be cramped in as few words as possible. And here it feels like you'll have some room to breathe and give some life to the various aspects of your book.
And we kind of had to cramp things in like the core rulebook and the bestiaries, like the early books. So it's like, well, once we've got that stuff and we've got like the very core of the game, then we're going to start having, some more leeway to do more fun things and expand things in different ways, rather than just kind of, adding rules as many as we could fit in each page.
And you start off the book with these fantastic in-world treatises talking about the 4 traditions of magic in Pathfinder and the 8 schools of magic. And for our D&D players who watch this, I'm sure they're familiar with the arcane school, type of magic or the divine type of magic. But Pathfinder also has the occult and the primal schools. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about those and how those play into the world.
Sure. So the primal school is probably like the most familiar one because it's what druids use, and anyone using, tapping into the power of the world around them, natural forces, not looking at, higher supernatural beings like divine would, and not trying to, kind of manipulate the laws of the universe quasi-mathematically, scientifically, like arcane does, but really just kind of feeling one with the life around them, the world around them. And the treatise on that one, I think, does a really good job of conveying that, where it's it's talking about how to root yourself in what's around you and really kind of feel a part of a whole. And then occult is what bards use, and then a lot of other casters who can kind of choose from different traditions of magic. It's kind of the more like weird mystery type of magic, kind of unknown forces, and there's a little bit of like creepy stuff in there and a lot of mental stuff in there. So it is a pretty good fit for like the bard. And we also did just recently did a playtest where we have the psychic class that uses occult magic, and so those are kind of both playing in that pool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the different feels for the different schools of magic. And in a moment, we're going to talk about, well, we can talk about it right now. The two new classes in this book are the magus. Is it magus? Help me settle that. It is magus.
I say magus. I've heard magus. I've heard magus. I say magus.
Well, you're the one in charge, so we're going to go with that. So we got the magus, we've got the summoner, and you were talking about, the schools of magic, and you have, with the summoner class, I was just thinking about this when you mentioned like having room to breathe and having the ability to add these little flavor things in there. You talk about your summoner has their eidolon, which is the person that they summon, that they kind of have this bond with, that they go through their game with. And the link between the summoner and the eidolon, you have a little section in the book that talks about how it maybe depends on what's type of magic they use. So if it's a primal connection or if it's an occult connection. And I love that kind of stuff. But tell us about the two classes, how you chose which ones to bring. And these are both from Pathfinder First Edition. Like, what's the process of bringing them to a new edition here?
Yeah, when we were looking at kind of the core concept of this book, we there are a lot of spellcasting classes. First edition had a whole ton of classes, some of which like we don't think we need to do again because there are other ways to kind of get that same concept. But two of the ones that really stood out were the magus and the summoner. They were really popular. They're both kind of interesting tweaks. They're not just like barely not a wizard, right? They play differently. They interact with things differently. So it was honestly a pretty easy choice for this book. I think the bigger choice was like, do we do anything other than the magus in the summer? And but these two are kind of a lock from pretty early on. And we also knew that we could do really fun things with the way they play, given how Pathfinder 2 is structured, because you have 3 actions per turn. So we knew there were cool ways you could have the summoner do things and their eidolon do things, and have it be, really flexible and fun to play with. So that's kind of how they made it in. And whenever we do a class for second edition, we kind of take a look at the core concept of what it did before and say like, okay, if we were starting from scratch, how would we build this? And sometimes we pull in concepts directly, and sometimes we really reinvent them. The Summoner is one that is kind of interesting because it had a revision in first edition to kind of make it more thematic. The initial one, you kind of built your pet and companion out of points, and you could kind of make it whatever. It's what Jason called like make the beast with 8 butts. Because you could just kind of like pile these things together, and then you made whatever you made. And the newer versions take it more kind of thematically, so you can have like a demon or an angel or a beast that you're companioned with, so that we could do a little more specific things with them and make each of those kind of pop a little bit better.
How did you decide which types of eidolons you wanted to bring into this to give you that diverse choice?
Well, we had a big list. There's a lot of options there, and we kind of boiled it down with 2 things. One is like, which of these are really important in Pathfinder's world, and the other is which are ones that we just know people are going to really, really want to play, are really going to want to have as their companion. So stuff like the beast kind of fits both of those, because we have this group of people called God Callers, who are kind of the most prominent summoners, like literally summoner class summoners in our world. And their eidolons are all beast themed. So it's like, okay, well, that one's a slam dunk. We're definitely having that one. And then there's stuff like, a demon. It's like, yeah, we know people are going to want a big, tough demon to go beat some things up.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just love the kind of role-playing opportunities that these give you, because there's so many stories you can tell with, you're essentially playing 2 classes, or you're playing 2 characters in this adventure, which is a bit of a challenge. And I know a lot of our players are people watching our channel are coming from D&D, and Pathfinder can sometimes be a little bit intimidating for them as a new game, as a next step game. How would you describe, as far as the complexity of these classes to play for a new player? Do you think these are sort of a next step class after you got your feet wet in Pathfinder, or are these ones that maybe you can jump right into. What do you think?
I think these are typically the kind of next step level, especially the summoner, because yeah, you are kind of having to deal with a lot of tactical positioning and combining actions and things like that. The magus, it really helps to at least get like a one shot in playing like a wizard or a fighter, because you're kind of doing some fighting, you're doing some spell casting, so at least kind of get an idea of how the action system works and how spellcasting works, because then you pretty quickly be able to see like, oh, here's how those things combine for the magus. But if you're just jumping straight in, I would recommend, at least if you are just going to start out straight out with a summoner, talk to your GM and just be like, okay, if I figure out what I picked doesn't work at all, I want to make sure that I can respec my character between sessions, right? Just to kind of give yourself a fallback if you're like, oh, that's not how I thought that worked at all.
These are such tempting classes. I think, sort of the warrior mage and the person who has a demon in front of them to help take those blows while you do something else behind them. So I can see the GMs having to have those conversations. The next part of the book moving into is your huge new list of spells.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of kind of new families of spells in here, and I'll let you kind of maybe describe some of those, but how did you decide what type of spells you wanted to introduce in this book?
The main thing was kind of looking at those magical concepts. Pretty much everything in this book was, all right, what do we like about magic? And what do we want to reflect in the rules? So a lot of them are like, what's a cool magical thing from games, from fiction, or just things you naturally think of. So that's how we got like time spells. Okay, getting to play with time. We'll put some time spells in. Morph spells will let you transform. It's like, okay, we need more of those. And then there's also kind of this smaller category, which is like kind of gaps in the spell list, because we only had so much space in the other books, right? So we don't have enough necromancy spells at this level, or we don't have a cantrip that can do this particular niche. So we're going to make sure we cover some of those. So those are kind of the two main driving forces. There's one that's kind of related to that first one, which is kind of utility stuff. So like I mentioned, cantrips, we have some that are like, okay, this is a damage dealing divine cantrip, and that's something that we needed. But we also want to make some more cantrips that are just kind of fun and weird things that people might want to do in the world. So we have one that's called bullhorn, which just like lets you talk louder for a while. It's like, yeah, we could see somebody using a spell like this. There's approximate, which is like, oh, there's somebody dropped a bunch of stuff, how much stuff is here? Or I want to cheat at the carnival jelly bean counting contest, how many jelly beans? So there's some stuff like that. It's like we wanted to make sure there were things other than just like, oh, here's the new batch of combat spells. So here's all kinds of stuff that kind of fleshes out the world a little more.
So when you're doing research for a book like this, I imagine you go and look at popular fiction, the Harry Potters, the Doctor Stranges of the world, but it seems you mine mythologies of our world as well. Like, what does that process look like? Is it, I imagine, early in the design where you're kind of looking at research?
Yeah. So what I did was a lot of these were kind of ideas that are already floating around. So kind of the first thing I did was pull some of the coworkers. It's like, okay, what are some representations of magic that you've really liked in fiction and games, in movies, whatever it might be, and just kind of got like a short list of those. And then I took a couple days to just kind of like, all right, I'm not doing any other work. I'm closing work chat. I'm going to play some video games that have interesting magic systems and play enough to get a sense of what the cool things about them are, and look at ways to implement those into Pathfinder rules, and just kind of like didn't dig super deep to get every detail, but got enough of a sense of it that's like, okay, I know the basics of what we want, and then we can hire a freelancer to execute on this and make something really cool.
Do you have any particular favorite spells in here that got added in?
Favorite spells. So there's a whole category of spells that I want to mention, which is the incarnate spells. And they're a type of summoning spell that is really inspired by like the Final Fantasy style summon spells, where it's just like something shows up, it kicks butt, and it leaves. Because the basic summon spells and the core rulebook are, kind of more I summon a badger, and that badger bites people for a while, every round, and then it goes away. And this is more like the spirit of an incredible archmage who shows up, casts some super powerful spell, sticks around just long enough to leave on my next turn, does something really cool when they get here, does something really cool when they leave, and I'm not tracking stats for it. I'm not doing all its actions. I'm just getting some big bang out of it.
That
Those
was
are
my
really
favorite too. You can summon a draconic legion. You can summon a kaiju. I didn't make that connection to Final Fantasy, but like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And yeah, that was one of my favorites too. I love that. Do you plan to, like in the future books, expand on these little classes of spells? Because you also have like the contingency spells, where you kind of prepare something ahead of time that might happen in the battle, and then you kind of gain a reaction to do it. Like, do you have plans to expand on these later?
Yeah, we have plans to expand on some of those. Some of those are harder than others. Like the contingency spells are tricky because you don't want to have, if they're too broad, then they're really a pain at your table, right? And another category is the kind of variable action spells, because we have the three actions per turn structure. You can say, all right, this does something cool and different if you cast it using 1, 2, or 3 actions. Those are actually more limited than they look, just because there are a lot of ways you can make those where it's like, well, you always want to cast it for 3, because if it's like, it's a fireball, a bigger fireball, and then a really big fireball, it's like, well, you always want the really big fireball pretty much. So those are like challenging to do more of. So we want to, but we have to be very careful with them. Something like the incarnate spells, there's just so many concepts you can do that they're far less limited. So we could just do, 8 more of those, and they would just be thematically different, and they would probably all work pretty well.
I can't wait to see what y'all come up with. That's just a fun one to play around with, I bet.
Yeah.
Now, the next part of the book is your items, and you introduce, I think, a lot of really exciting things in this. This is kind of the sleeper best part of the book to me. You have, help me with it, the fulus is the way you pronounce it, which...
yeah, pretty close, yeah.
Based on the Taoist traditions. You have the grimoires, which are like special spell books that offer you special abilities for certain types of spells and other things. And you have the spell catalysts, which are spell components that add a little extra oomph to your spells. Tell us a little bit, kind of like your favorite one of these and what they add to the game.
I think my favorite of them is probably the spell hearts, because those they're a trinket, which is kind of a for folks who haven't played Pathfinder 2, is a magic item that you attach to another item to activate under certain conditions. So like a basic one from the core rulebook might be like, okay, I attach this to my weapon, and then when I swing my weapon, I can do a special magical effect if my weapon hits, right? Then the spell hearts are kind of a modular one, and they're a permanent item instead of a one-use item. So for instance, there's a fire one. If you have a flaming sword, that's great when you're fighting, a white dragon. It's not so good when you're fighting a red dragon. But the fire spell heart, you can put on a weapon to deal some fire damage, or you can put on your armor to get some fire resistance. So if I'm fighting the white dragon, I put on my weapon. If I'm fighting the red dragon, I put on my armor. And then they also give you a spell that you can cast. So those are really fun because they're kind of a fun little puzzle. It's like, what concepts can I do that can work in 2 directions and still feel like just one item? So those, I did the initial design on those, and those are really fun to make.
The ones that give you that flexibility and that you can use in a lot of different situations makes those fun to have and use. I love that. The other thing I love about this section is the crafting capabilities that you give, because players always want to make things. They want to make something that's unique, that's never been made before. And you have like the tattoo artist that you introduced, which is, I think, a feat that you can take to learn how to make these tattoos for folks. And you have these personalized staves that you can make, which at first I was thinking sort of like the wands in Harry Potter, but it's not really that. It's more you're creating this repository of special spells that are all thematically linked. Tell us, like, how did y'all come up with these kind of concepts, and where do you plan to take it?
The staves in particular were kind of, we have our internal rules on how to make a staff, but there's such like an iconic utility item for spellcasters. And like, it's a cool visual. The mechanics of it are built so that like, you really want to make sure you have a cool staff. But they take a lot of space to do each one. So we can't cover the whole breadth of them. So this was a fun way to kind of say like, okay, you really want to go all in on this. We're going to make it so you can kind of pick your own theme and make a staff that you really like. And it kind of just, it costs a little more money than a normal staff that's kind of pre-built, but you get to really kit it out and customize it how you want. It's kind of like, buying a car off a lot versus, customizing the car yourself. So that was kind of the concept there, is it really lets you get a little more self-expression in. And that's kind of a driving force on a lot of the things we put in this book is, how do you make your character feel unique and express the story you want to tell with them?
I just, reading this section of the book made me want a Secrets of Magic 2 that just expands on all these. It gives us more eidolons, more grimoires, more catalysts. But I guess we just kind of get those sprinkled into future books and adventures now. Like, now that these exist, we can just get more of them everywhere.
Yeah, okay. And I believe the Grand Bazaar that came out recently has some more of some of these categories of items. The places that we knew we were going to be able to expand on later, we kind of kept a little bit shorter, whereas like spells, like just getting kind of, broadly themed spells, we don't have a whole lot of chances to do that. So it's like, okay, we're going to pack as many spells in this book as possible.
Oh, there's a lot of spells in here, and there's a lot of really fun ones too. Before I let you go, I was hoping that you could tease us a little bit about some of your upcoming projects. I think your next book is Book of the Dead. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That one, and that seems to be so. It looks like, now help me if I'm wrong here, that the Pathfinder 2nd edition is saying that your Bestiary 3 is kind of the last official major Bestiary. And we're going to introduce new monsters more in these kind of books that are tied to a certain theme. But they're not just Bestiaries. Can you tell us a little bit about Book of the Dead?
Yeah, so Book of the Dead is kind of, if you want a bigger undead theme for your campaign, this is the book to pick up. In the same way that Secrets of Magic, if you want to go and dive deeper into magic in your campaign, that's the book to pick up. So Book of the Dead has a really big monster section with, brand new undead, some classic first edition undead that we brought forward, and like additional undead for certain categories. So like there are more liches, there are more zombies, there are more skeletons. So we wanted to make sure that like if you're buying this just for the monsters, you're still getting plenty of monsters to make it a really satisfying book. But there's also stuff like, what if I want to play as a mummy, my character as a mummy? Well, you can do that. So we have playable undead if you want to have like an undead themed campaign. We also have some stuff for people who fight against the undead. So, you could see buying this for like, okay, we're going to do a campaign against a bunch of undead. So somebody at the table is going to buy this book. So the GM has some monsters to use and the players have some undead fighting tools. We also kind of go into some of the world details on some of these creatures, and that's both like regions where undead are popular, and there's also like, what would somebody write about liches if they lived in the world of Pathfinder? So we have some stuff like that in there that's kind of fun to read and study.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that one. Do you have any other projects you're able to tease us about that are coming up anytime soon?
I think the only one that we have announced is the Dark Archive, because we're doing the playtest of that. So we've put up the playtest with the Psychic and the Thaumaturge, who's kind of like the John Constantine style character who collects a bunch of weird magical trinkets and knows how to use them. Right. And just kind of has a little bit of everything. So those are the main things that we've announced about that book. I'm not going to go into a whole ton of detail just because I'm not sure how many things we've kind of seeded out there. And also like with this book, if I say something that meme gets lodged in your brain, it might make you susceptible to occult forces. So I don't want to.
Oh, that's fair.
I don't want to.
I was about to ask you. I was about to ask you that thing that talked about like the dossiers that is kind of based around or something like that. There's like a certain number of dossiers, which is kind of introduce some fun things. Well, that book I'm really looking forward to, and we'll put the covers up on the screen so people can see those. Anything else you want to leave us with today about Secrets of Magic? Any favorite parts? Anything that you think our players should be really excited about with this book that I haven't asked you about already?
I think the main part we didn't touch on is the last chapter, which is the Book of Unlimited Magic. And that's just kind of a place where it's like, okay, what wild, weird, magical stuff can we put into a game that has like geomancy and elementalism, has ley lines and true names. Just kind of like, if you've heard this magical concept out there in the ether somewhere, there's probably a representation of it here. And so that part is just kind of go off the chain.
You've got like feats in there. I think you've got archetypes. Lots of ways to kind of just really customize the way you do magic in your game, and that's another favorite part of mine of the book. That like even the emotional catharsis kind of magic that you see.
Right. Yeah.
There's just a lot of fun stuff in here. Well, Logan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
We really appreciate talking to you. Hopefully you'll come on back here when we have Book of the Dead and the Dark Archive. We'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Thank you. Secrets of Magic is available now for an MSRP of $49.99 or $14.99 for the PDF over on Paizo.com. And don't forget, you can also peruse much of the new content over at the Archives of Nethys website. This is another phenomenal book that should really enrich your games. Definitely check it out if you can. And let me know what you think about it in the comment section down below. And many thanks again to Logan Bonner for coming to talk to us about it today. Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to the Big Bad Booklets from our friends at Hit Point Press, you're really missing out. These handy booklets feature a new, amazingly creative Big Bad each month with stat blocks, backstory, story hooks, tactics, minions, and all sorts of fun little details. It is a great way to put together a one-shot or a mini campaign, or to add a little side adventure to your own campaigns. And now you can even get STL files to print minis of the Big Bads themselves. It is such a great deal. This month, come meet the twisted, tangled plant monstrosity Emmeline Killjoy, a floral foe who was once human but is now fuming inside her greenhouse, lamenting her lost love. Will you cut her down for good, or will she consume you in her tangled tendrils? Subscribe today to find out at bigbads.com. Also, be sure to check out all the Epic Encounter boxes from our friends at Steamforged Games. I don't know if we've ever reviewed a product line that got as much love from you all as the Epic Encounter series. Each box comes with either 20 amazing and thematic minis or one giant boss mini, plus a high-quality, reusable double-sided map, and an encounter book to help you tell an engrossing story with lots of exciting cinematic moments. They're perfect to run on their own, to introduce new people to game mastering, or to enhance your existing campaigns with a little side mission. Or do what I do and use those boss boxes to run a cinematic encounter for your own whole campaign. Each one features something new, and I'm always so excited to see what's next. Check out all the Epic Encounter reviews here on the channel and see which ones belong on your gaming shelves. Learn more at the link in the doohickey down below. And thank you for watching today. We have so much Pathfinder content coming up on the channel. Be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any. If you have things that you'd like to see us cover, please let me know in the comment section down below. You can find our first Pathfinder supplement, Queerfinder, is a bestseller at queerfinder.org, and you can sign up for our Kobold Plush Kickstarter at koboldplush.com. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. For now, stay safe, have fun, love each other, and I'll see you next time at the Gallant Goblin.